I went to, not back to Miami to teach, but to Mentor, Ohio, where I was band director at Mentor Shore Junior High School. The fall was something quite new and different for me. We, of course, had some fall in Tallahassee. I had never seen a real northern fall. This one was not spectacular as they go. There's Mentor Shore Junior High School, grades 7 and 8. I was a 7th grade band director. My good friend Bernie Spizak was the 8th grade band director. Small school district. Here we are. This is Bernie's band in rehearsal. Bernie was originally from Pittsburgh. Also played clarinet. Had a real good bands. We started teaching kids instruments and private lessons in the 5th grade. And by the time they got to the 8th grade, they played very well. This is some more of the fall scenery in and around Mentor. Mentor was really a pretty rural area at the time. I believe we had 5,000 students in the school district. I went looking for some fall colors to take, and here in the cemetery were some of the prettiest trees at the time. This is where I lived. I rented a room in this house. My landlady's name was Mrs. Bemis, and she had lived in this old farmhouse for many, many years. Most of the farm had been sold off and subdivided, but she still had a couple of acres in the house. And I had 2 rooms over on the extreme left side. The last window on the left was my window. And we shared the kitchen, and got to be rather good friends. She was an old lady who was, I guess she was close to 80 when I first met Mrs. Bemis. Well up in her 70s anyway, and she was wallpapering the ceiling of her bedroom when I first met her. The driveway is a rather lengthy one there, goes across a little ravine, which you'll see in a minute. This is a fall scene. Here's from the other side, looking back up the driveway. That driveway, as you can see, slopes up to the road. That's the only place I ever got stuck during that winter's snow. But it was quite a job to get that driveway cleared in the wintertime. There's a view of the ravine. And here's the house in the wintertime. I had a copy of this picture and a copy of the other picture made and framed as a set and gave Mrs. Bemis, and she was just very thrilled with them. It was an interesting old house. The floors weren't level. She was always remodeling it, putting in a new window here, putting in a new floor there. It was an interesting winter for me living there. The cold and the snow was, of course, quite new to me, and I did not enjoy it at all. I was quite apprehensive about driving, and I stayed indoors. This is the view out my front window. You can see the driveway there and the snow. This is a view out the side window of my room. Again, this is taken from inside. And there you see I had a thermometer. I can't read what the thermometer says, but I really didn't go out much. But spring came at last, and it was a lovely spring. I guess I never really appreciated what spring meant until after having been through the winter. These are my 2 good friends, aside from Bernie Spizak. The man on the right is Ted Perry, who was the head of our social studies department. The gentleman on the left, his first name is Bob. I don't remember Bob's name. Bob did not come back to Shore the next year. Ted stayed there for a good many years, and we remained friends and corresponded, and I even visited with him off and on. He's passed away a few years back. But when the spring came, the 3 of us, who were, I guess, the 3 bachelors on the faculty at Shore, enjoyed ourselves traveling around sightseeing. This is the Mormon church in Kirtland, Ohio. This, I believe, is in Mrs. Bemis's front yard on the other side of the driveway. some of the flowers in our garden. Spring flowers, of course, were something I didn't know much about, except for the azaleas and camellias and things that we'd had in Tallahassee. But the bulbs were really quite new to me. This is along the driveway and approaching the garage. This is in the yard of, I believe, Mrs. Bemis's son's house. Ted and Bob and I, one of our excursions, we went down to Cleveland to the art museum, and these are some of the some shots there. The only time I ever played any golf was that spring. There was a 9-hole par 3 course nearby, and we liked to get out in the evening, the long summer evenings, early summer evenings, and play golf. But I was tired of the cold weather. I'm tired of shoveling snow, and so I set my course back to Florida. This is a picture taken in the Florida Keys on a trip down there. But actually, I went back to Tallahassee to summer school in the summer of 1960, and wound up staying there, going to graduate school the winter of 60-61. This is driving down the Keys in the Rambler. Notice the inspection sticker, safety inspection sticker at the top of the windshield. This would have been the Bahia Honda Bridge. There's now a state park on this site, but those days it was you just pulled off the road and went and used the beach or whatever. The Keys were much less settled and much less built up than they are now. And my dad fishing. And my dad and I believe that's Ron Bell in the pith helmet. And this was certainly a nice, lazy trip. Scenes along the beaches. Simply scenes from all around the state of Florida over a period of years. This would have been, this is on, I believe, Tamiami Trail, west of Miami, State US 41. This would have been a bit earlier because that was a Jeep station wagon there. The picture's a canal alongside the trail. Here's another scene of it during the day. This is what the Everglades looked like, at least alongside the highway. This is a sunset over Lake Okeechobee. On one of the few parts of the lake that there's not a dike around it. In 1959, my dad and I bought a couple of building lots in Port St. Lucie, Florida, and there wasn't any road to them, but this is what it looked like, and near as we could tell, we were standing about on our property. Of course, it hadn't been subdivided yet, and would not be for some years, but we bought it for $10, bought each lot for $10 down and $10 a month. This is the Swanee River. In North Florida, along US 19. This is the Swanee River. If it looks like it, it's a flood stage. Another view of the Swanee. And this is the governor's mansion, built in 1958, or finished in 1958, the year I graduated, in Tallahassee. And this is Lake Talquin, west of Tallahassee. In the early 60s, there was a time when the dam broke. Lake Talquin's a man-made dam, and of course all the water went out and left just the riverbed. So you can see what the drowned riverbed was like in the lake. And it was some years before they were able to get the lake filled up again. This is a Torreya State Park, looking down the Apalachicola River. And this is the house at Torreya State Park. Made several trips there. This is an early trip. View of the other side of the house at Torreya on another trip. And this is looking from the river back up at the house at Torreya. And I guess that's from the top of the bluff looking down the river. and from the porch of the house looking down at the river. Winter 60-61, I was at Florida State working on a master's degree in library science. One of the things that we did that year was a trip in the spring to Luther Ridge with the student group, Lutheran student group from the university. This is a picture in North Carolina. I was one of the people that drove. There's my car in the picture. This is actually at I believe on the campus of Narr College. These are some scenes in the mountains around Luther Ridge, which is the Lutheran camp. Typical beautiful Blue Ridge mountain scenes, and this is in the early spring. You see the dogwoods are just starting to bloom. I have no idea, who any of these folks were. They were other folks who were along on the trip. I really don't remember them. And this is from, I believe, from the top of Mount Mitchell. If you go to the top of Mount Mitchell, you have to take a picture, of course. This is actually at Luther Ridge at the camp. This is the chapel. And you can see some of the flowering trees there and among the taller trees. The year 61-62, I was back in Miami working as a school librarian at Shenandoah Junior High School. These are some scenes taken in Miami during that winter. This is at probably the Crandon Park Zoo, the forerunner of the Metro Zoo, which is now down in South Day. They had this railroad that ran around. This was Crandon Park Zoo opened when I was in junior high school. The whole park did. It was a popular place. This aquarium, one of Miami's premier tourist attractions. The sequence of pictures actually comes from two different trips in different years to this aquarium. And typical kinds of sea park shows, such as you see at SeaWorld. Seaquarium was not the first one of these types of attractions. Marineland, actually, up the east coast on A1A near Daytona was. But I believe the Seaquarium was the second one. Now these are from another year, from a different viewpoint. This is later. The shows have gotten a bit more sophisticated. And here's three of them. 3 dolphins jumping. And this is some scenes in the tanks, in the main tanks of the aquarium. You walk around and look in the windows at the fish. This is some sort of a sand bottom-dwelling shark, the sea turtle, the dolphins, the sawfish on the bottom, and dolphins and a baby dolphin overhead. The big groupers or jewfish on the bottom. They had small tanks of coral reef fish, which had photography lights in them that you could turn on. And these are beautiful little tanks of fish. Sea anemones. Picnic with my folks, Ron Bell. Not really sure who the young lady is. Must have been in the winter time sometime. Probably a beach. I don't think that's a beach near Miami. Must have been somewhere up the East Coast. I know who that is. That's Nancy Jane Darling, who was a member of the church choir at St. Peter's. On the right, you see Tom Thornton and my folks. The lady in the white was, I believe, our church deaconess, a good friend of the family. Here's my mom and dad at Creighton's restaurant on the waterway in Fort Lauderdale, one of our favorite places to go on a Sunday afternoon. There's another picnic. There's Nancy Jane. There's Ron Perkerson on the left-hand side, sitting next to my dad. The Rambler got around, as you can see. My friend Hugh Jones, who I went to high school with and college with. He was played baritone, was in the band both at Miami High and at FSU. Last I heard of Hugh, he had been a band director in Jackson, Mississippi for many, many years. This is Thanksgiving in 1963. And here's my mom and my dad, my grandmother Taylor and my grandfather Taylor, and the lady in the dark dress in front next to my mother is my Aunt June. This is at the house on 16th Terrace that my folks moved to in 1960. Lived there till 1964. Another picture taken that same time. I said this was Thanksgiving 1963. This is in a 1963 trip. My folks and I going somewhere. We stopped to see I believe it was my dad's cousin Johnny up on the East Coast. That's his family. And this is December the 7th, 1963, in Opelika, Florida. And this is Tom and Barbara Thornton's wedding. The only wedding that I was ever member of the wedding party. I was best man. It's Tom's 59 Oldsmobile there in extreme right. Barbara's bridesmaids all in blue. And there they are. And this, of course, is after the ceremony. Let's see if I can lighten that up a little. There we go. I think this is a picture my mother took. There I am next to Tom as best man. And that's I believe that's Barbara's mother. And there's Tom's folks, his dad next to him, Bill Thornton, and his mother Janice in the dark blue dress. And we can do better than that. There we go. Don't we all look young? And there they are cutting the cake. Now there's a sequence of the cars that we had in the 50s and 60s. This, of course, is the 49 Jeep station wagon. It was our family car from 1949 1955, and then I drove it to college, the rest until I graduated. It was originally red with, maroon rather, with imitation paneling. Then it was dark blue, then it was light blue. This is how it looked last year, senior year. It was replaced, for my folks replaced it for their purposes with this 1946 Chrysler Windsor. 1955, 9 years old, with about 30,000 miles on it. The fine old car, 6-cylinder engine, semi-automatic transmission. Notice the little fender finder on the right front fenders that you could see over the hood and tell where the edge of the car was, because it was so much bigger than what they were used to having, they were used to driving. There you can see that better. This is taken in front of the house on 18th Street. They replaced that with this another used car, a 1954 Cadillac Coupe de Ville. Wonderful car. 230 horsepower V8, 4-speed automatic transmission, power windows, seats, etc., etc. A real luxury. This is taken at the house on 16th Terrace. And there's the front of the Cadillac. The Rambler's in the... This is taken from in the garage, actually, the house. The Rambler's in the garage. And out at the curb is the car I replaced the Rambler with, the 62 Buick Special Sedan. And there's another view of the Caddy. This car my dad gave to my grandmother and grandfather, and my grandfather actually died driving this car in a freak accident, which the car was hardly at all damaged. And after his death, my grandmother kept the car and used it for a couple of years. And then one day, when she started it up, the engine caught fire. And that was the end of the car. Although it wasn't destroyed, it really wasn't worth fixing. And there, of course, is my Rambler. 58 Rambler Super 6 Cross Country. Push-button automatic transmission. 6-cylinder engine. My grandfather Milsom and grandfather and grandmother gave me this as graduation present from college, and I drove it 4 years, and then my dad drove it for a couple of years after that. Immediately behind the Rambler in this scene is the other Jeep station wagon that we had. This is a 52 that belonged to my grandfather. In fact, at the time this picture was taken, it probably belonged to my grandfather. After he died, my dad used it for several years to go to work in. Had it, I guess, until along about 1965. And there's my first Buick, 62 Buick Special Deluxe model, 215 cubic inch aluminum V8, 2-speed automatic transmission. It was our first air-conditioned car. I had air conditioning put into it a year after I bought it. As I recall, this car cost $3,200. It cost $2,800, brand new, and I paid another $400. This again is at the house on 16th Terrace. And this is the car I replaced that one with. This is a 1965 Buick Skylark Grand Sport. 400 cubic inches V8. 325 horsepower, 445 pounds-feet of torque. About 12 miles a gallon. But it would go like the wind. And out at the curb is 1964 Mercury Parkland sedan that replaced my father's Cadillac. That's what they bought when they got rid of the Cadillac. This is at the house on 90th Court that they built in 1965. 6655 Southwest 90th Court. This is a new subdivision just being developed. As you can see, there's still a vacant lot across the street. I really liked that car. But I only had it 3 years. '60s, I made a lot of trips to various parts of the country with my folks. This is the Biltmore Mansion in Asheville, North Carolina. The trip in 1963. The first time we'd ever been to this spot. And the mansion is quite impressive. Had one of the major tourist attractions in Asheville. These are some views from the porch, the portico on the top, looking out across the valley. Beautiful scene. And the house sits in its own park, really. Enormous estate. This is later on that same trip, Covered Bridge in Ohio. We went back to Ohio fairly frequently to see my friends there, my mother's and father's friends there. My mother. This trip was in my '62 Buick. We spent quite some time here around this covered bridge somewhere in Ohio. A beautiful spot. A close up of the bridge. There's my dad. And this is back in Mentor. That summer where we spent several days, the streets in Mentor, the quiet little village, which still was at that time. One of the principal industries there, businesses at that time, was the growing of flowers for florists. Beautiful fields of flowers. And these are the folks in Mentor. Of course, there's my dad and my mom there on the extreme left side. And next to my mother is Linda Hood, who was a student of mine in the 7th grade band at Mentor. Went on to become a PhD audiologist. Next to her is Mr. Gordon Quick. Next to him is Bertha Hood, Linda's mom and my mother's very best friend when they were growing up. And behind her is Mrs. Quick. The Quicks were actually Bertha's aunt and uncle. They raised her. And the lady on the extreme right side is Mrs. Bemis, the lady who was my landlady the year that I lived there. It's the only picture I believe that I have of her. During the early '60s, I was a librarian at Southwest High School. This is a view of the library there. And one of the things that I did while I was at Southwest was to chaperone a number of trips of student groups, especially the chorus. In 1964, the Southwest Chorus went to the New York World's Fair to perform there in the Florida Pavilion. And I was one of the chaperones for that trip, a week-long trip by train and bus. And we spent several days there at the World's Fair site. There's a view of the Florida Pavilion. This is a Flushing Meadow, of course, on Long Island, adjacent to Shea Stadium. The Florida Pavilion had been actually used for the 1939 World's Fair as well. The big building there with the towers and the flags flying on it is the New York State Pavilion. I couldn't begin to tell you what all of these pavilions are at this point. To me, I'd never seen such a thing as a World's Fair, of course. It was really all quite striking and quite fascinating. And of course, all of the different countries were there with their pavilions and their shows. This is these scenes are taken from an elevated railway station, basically a subway station, but at this point is an elevated station, probably 50, 60 feet high. So we're looking out across the fairgrounds, and that, I believe, is Shea Stadium immediately behind the fairgrounds. You see the Unisphere there in the foreground, the big globe, which was the trademark of that fair. Some more scenes of the fair itself, and some scenes looking out across the city. Of course, the airplane up there landing, I suppose, at LaGuardia. Very colorful sight. The expressway cut right through the middle of it. The Unisphere, as I said, was a symbol of that World's Fair. I believe it's still there, as is the New York State Pavilion. You can still see those towers, that building alongside the interstate. And there are a lot of views of the Unisphere here. This is inside the New York State Pavilion. The top, the roof of it actually was suspended fabric of some kind. One of the national buildings. I don't know which one. This, of course, is China. China's pavilion is quite elaborate and quite a main attraction. And the Unisphere is the sunsets. And here's a night scene. We also managed to do a little sightseeing in New York City itself. Get around and see some of the tall buildings. And the United Nations. We spent quite some time at the United Nations. Went inside, saw the General Assembly chamber. Left New York City by bus. Had a view of the Statue of Liberty, of course. Went on south by bus to Washington, where we visited not only the Capitol building, but also the Kennedy grave site. And then on to Annapolis, Maryland, to the Naval Academy. And these pictures are taken inside the chapel at the Naval Academy there. It's really quite a beautiful place. In the summer of '64, we made a trip back to the central states, back to Ohio and Michigan. We went to Greenfield Village. These scenes are in Greenfield Village in Dearborn, Michigan. My dad had a convention in Pittsburgh. I dropped them off in Pittsburgh, back in a place that had been so familiar to me in our Wind Symphony days. Here's a scene of Point Park, which is still under construction. You see they're about to replace that bridge there on the point that was so prominent when I was there earlier. And there's the view of the Liberty Bridge, Liberty Tunnel, Mount Washington on the other side, and quite a traffic jam there, right, leaving town in the afternoon rush hour. I left them there, went on and visited Tom and Barbara, who'd been married, as you recall, the previous November, and they were living in Indianapolis, in an apartment, Tom and Barbara Thornton. We went to Key West. My dad had a lot of church meetings even then, and we went to Key West because of something he was doing for church down there. We stayed in that rather interesting A-frame house that belonged to one of the people in the church. We visited the Hemingway house, one of the very prominent attractions in Key West, then as now. I also visited the art galleries, as Key West was just really getting going as an art center. This particular art gallery in an old house was where we bought several pieces of mostly the pelicans that we still have. In the summer of 1965,